Chapter 7, A Body Without a Soul. And it starts with a quote by D.H. Lawrence. To love someone deeply gives you strength. Being loved by someone deeply gives you courage. Marie and Pierre garner strength and courage from their love for each other. In the domain of family or physics, their lives complement and blend together as a duet. They both want to work in the solitude of their laboratory and remain indifferent to the accolades. The problem is human beings in the world are consumed with the lure of radiation. Industry is finding more uses, ethical or not, for the Curie's radium. Their rock star status means constant intrusions with no staff to shield them or answer the mail. Invitations to banquets, box seat tickets for opening shows, honored guests at banquets are all opportunities for the Curies to see and be seen. The RSVP is usually no, and Marie answers no to a request for naming a racehorse Marie Curie. All this is what they don't like, and why Marie wrote to her family saying, "Above all, don't forget me." The Curies prefer quietly working at the laboratory rather than make small talk at an event, especially when the small talk leads to gossip. Marie lives by her motto, "We must be interested in things, not persons." Although one night, in a wistful moment, Pierre sees his beautiful Marie in a gown as they get ready to go out for the evening, and he laments, "It's a pity. Evening dress becomes you." An invitation they can't refuse is when the French president invites the Curies to a dinner. During the evening, the president's wife asks Marie, "Would you like me to introduce you to the king of Greece?" Marie, not realizing who is asking, responds, "I don't see the need." Then Marie realizes it's the president's wife who is asking and responds, "But of course." Another guest is the ambassador of Austria-Hungary. He represents the government that made it possible for the Curies to have pitchblende, so yes, they must go and talk with the ambassador. And this is a great example, though, where dignitaries, they have an aide, they have some kind of executive assistant that would be guiding them through some of this, reminding them, "Oh, over there is so-and-so, make sure you talk to them." And the Curies don't have that. They walk into this just as a couple and not all caught up on who's who. Back to the text. There are some highlights in this attention on the Curies. A famous dancer from the United States, Louise Fuller, is known as the Light Fairy. She writes to the Curies asking how to use radium on her costume. Fuller wants her outfit to glow while she is dancing on stage. The Curies write back and explain that having butterfly wings of radium will not work. Louis responds, "I have only one means of thanking you, for you have answered me. Let me dance one evening at your house, for the two of you." The Curies agree, but it is more than they bargained for, because first the electricians show up to transform the dining room into a stage setup. However, the Curies, touched by Miss Fuller's genuine kindness and beautiful performance, become close friends. As an aside, Fuller doesn't give up the idea of radium wings. Her assistants experiment with phosphorescent salts. When an explosion blows off their eyebrows and eyelashes, they finally give up. Others pick up the effort, and soon nightclub dancers are glowing on stage with costumes covered with radium paint. Back to the text. Radium is being marketed as a cure-all. It's the next generation of a snake oil miracle drug. Companies selling fraudulent products with false quotes by Curies see their sales skyrocket when radium is listed as an ingredient. Claims are made that radium will cure blindness, tuberculosis, and neuralgia. One company claims that radium is added to its fertilizers, and it guarantees that the crops by the farmer will double. When Marie tests the fertilizer, there is no radium. Health spas offer long soaks in radium mud, rinse with radium water, and a final application of a radium cream. Since Viagra hasn't been invented yet, radium is the answer for, quote, sagging men. And there's some delightful old advertisement photos of different radium products. It's in butter, it's in cigarettes. It's quite cute if you want to Google it and look it up. The craze will last 40 years into the market of toothpaste, tea, health tonic, lipstick, bath salts, and butter. Curie hair tonic promises to stop hair loss. Added to an inhaler, radium ensures richer blood. Strap a bag of radium mixture to your waist to heal arthritis. Household products that boast having the power of radium include heating pads, toys, watches, and clocks. Industry is promising that radium will heat houses and light the streets. There is no regulatory commission to challenge the claims, and there is no end to the ideas to make a profit. Into the 1920s, there is a drink being sold, Radithor, containing 1 part radium salts to 60,000 parts zinc sulfide. This is high, considering the energy emitted by pure radium can be diluted up to 600,000 times. With promises to cure cancer, mental illness, and restore sexual vigor, a wealthy American golf star, Eben Byers, drinks a bottle of Radithor every day for 4 years. His facial bones disintegrate, and he dies of cancer of the jaws. Like the desire to sport the most recent iPhone, men and women attending social gatherings are carrying glass vials of radium bromide in their pockets or purses. Pierre is shocked and writes a paper warning the public of the health risks. His warnings fall on deaf ears. A doctor, using the name Alfred Curie, is marketing cream thoradia. When Marie reads this, she asks a lawyer to write him to stop. Alfred Curie continues. Until the stories of suffering start to glare, it won't stop. For the next few years, the public alarm is growing and 15 deaths are attributed to radium exposure. The shift to more accurate reporting is in spite of the purposeful misinformation and denial from William Bailey, director of the United States Radium Corporation. Bailey, motivated by corporate greed, invokes Marie's name, without consulting her, as he proclaims, quote, "No one has worked longer or with greater amounts of radium than has Madame Curie. For over 25 years, she has toiled increasingly in her laboratory, and today she is not only alive, but reported recently to be in excellent health," end quote. It is Bailey's company employing dial painters. The dial painters are the workers who become known as the Radium Girls. Around 1917, the Radium Girls are female factory workers in New Jersey, hired to paint watch dials with a self-luminous paint. Told that the paint is harmless, the women are instructed to keep the tip of the brush pointed by licking their paintbrushes. An alarming number of workers start suffering from anemia, bone fractures, and necrosis of the jaw. 5 women take the company to court. The company launches a smear campaign against the women, claiming their sickness is due to syphilis. The wheels of justice are slow and wobbly, but the case is eventually won by the women and becomes a cornerstone in the field of health physics and the labor rights movement. In the meantime, the Curies received letters requesting information about the technique for extracting and purifying radium. If the Curies had decided to patent their information, they would have had a royalty income on all future manufacturing of radium around the world. Years later, Marie writes, "No detail was kept secret, and it is due to the information we gave in our publications that the industry of radium has been rapidly developed. Up to the present time, this industry hardly uses any method except those established by us. The treatment of the minerals and the fractional Crystallizations are still performed in the same way as I did in my laboratory, even if the material means are increased." End quote. While radium has become the darling of public interest, Marie is watching over her polonium. A German scientist believes polonium is not a new element, but instead just a compound. Marie goes to her lab, renews her research of polonium, and writes a paper in German to refute the accusations. She explains that the element the German scientist is describing, that he claims to have isolated and discovered, is in fact polonium, what Marie already discovered. For the summer of 1905, the Curies spend their vacation at the shore. Irene will be 8 in September and is flourishing in the non-traditional parenting style of her parents. Irene, more an introvert like her parents, is never required to give a mandatory smile or a greeting to adults. Eve, not yet a year old, is already outgoing. During these quiet weeks away with their children, Pierre and Marie enjoy long walks and equally long talks. Marie's sister Helena has come to join them for the holiday. As Marie and Hella walk the beach, they reminisce about their childhood and that crazy teenage summer visiting relatives and dancing till dawn. The discussion turns to the political unrest that continues in Poland. In January, one demonstration in Warsaw becomes known as Bloody Sunday. More than 140,000 peasants and workers, including women and children, marched to the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg to present a petition. The peaceful demonstration ends in disaster when Tsar Nicholas II gives the order to open fire on the crowd. 5,000 innocent civilians are wounded and over 1,000 are killed. Marie worries about her homeland, and she is worrying about Pierre. He has constant pain in his legs. He is unable to walk on the beaches because his balance is so unsteady. Marie tells Helena, "Maybe it is some terrible disease that doctors don't recognize. Maybe Pierre will never be well again." Returning to Paris, Pierre cuts back on his schedule. There are days he is too weak to dress himself, and the pain in his bones keeps him awake at night. When Marie expresses her fear of a life without him, Pierre replies, "It is necessary to continue, no matter what." Spiritualism and seances are in fashion at this time. For women, the seance room gives them a chance at gender equality, the ability to have otherworld experiences, see the future, or manifesting spirits is a position of power. Considering the unknown is revealing itself in forms of new elements and new energy, it is no surprise scientists are searching for answers in the realm of the spiritual. William Crookes, an English chemist and physicist, writes, quote, "Spiritualist phenomena that cannot be explained by any physical law at present known is a fact of which I am as certain as I am of the most elementary fact of chemistry." End quote. Crookes, president of the British Society of Physical Research, claims to have met a ghost. Jean Perrin, physicist and Curie's friend, and his wife Henriette, along with Crookes, George Goyer, a physicist, Paul Langevin, a physicist, Pierre's brother Jacques, all attend numerous seances with the Italian medium Eusebia Palladino. What is a difference from the conventional customers seeking comfort, these visits are comparable to a scientific experiment. Pierre writes to a friend, quote, "I hope we are able to convince you of the reality of the phenomena, or at least some of them. The result is that the phenomena really exists. It is not possible for me to doubt it anymore. It's unbelievable, but that's the way it is. It is possible to deny it after the seances which we have had under conditions of perfect control. Strange, shapeless, fluid members are formed from the medium, separate from her own arms and legs, capable of pushing objects around. What is troubling is that one feels very strongly that by admitting to the existence of some of these phenomena, one could, little by little, admit the ghosts. How to explain that such transformations of matter can happen so rapidly and without using prodigious quantities of energy? Pierre is attempting to make sense of this territory of unknown. His curiosity continues, quote, I wanted to see if the air was ionized, able to conduct electricity around the medium, but the sound of a small fan which stirred the air was enough to upset her and stop her working. Enough difficulty comes from the fact that she tries to cheat even if she knows how to produce certain phenomena, because this is less tiring of her. After the last seance Pierre attends, he writes, there is here, in my opinion, a whole domain of entirely new facts and physical states in space of which we have no conception, end quote. Eusapia Palladino is later exposed as a fraud. The point remains that these esteemed physicists are willing to consider the scientific possibility in the spirit world. They are unabashed in their search for new knowledge and in their desire to discover unknown sources of energy. The last few years caught scientists by surprise when they realized the discovery of radioactivity came from a source they had written off. Scientists are willing to look under any rock, even spiritual rocks, for the next big revelation. In January 1906, there is good news for the Curies. Pierre, now a member of the French Academy of Sciences, will be the one to present Marie's latest paper, entitled On the Diminution of Radioactivity of Polonium Over Time. And then I have as an aside, when a person writes this type of paper, is it any wonder the Curies don't enjoy idle chit-chat? Back to the text. Family life continues into 1906 with its usual mundane dilemmas. Marie writes to Bronya for advice on parenting and cooking. Marie's journal entries at home are full of notes on skin knees, fevers, making jellies, and domestic duties. Not so mundane is Pierre's ill health. Pierre is feeling the need to make the most of his time, and he is putting in more hours. This is bothersome to Marie. She is torn with wanting to go to work with Pierre and yet wants to take a small step back and enjoy their young family. They are a couple trying to stay in tune with each other and balance their priorities. It's no different today. Marie worries about Pierre. She has lost her mother, sister, father, a newborn child, and a nephew. Marie asks him that spring, quote, Pierre, if one of us disappeared, the other should not survive. We can't exist without each other, can we? Pierre prophetically responds, you are wrong. Whatever happens, even if one of us has to go on like a body without a soul, one must work just the same, end quote. In April, the Curies take a short getaway. Marie is out of sorts that Pierre doesn't leave on the same day with her and the girls. He arrives the next day on the train. Any indication of a spat between Pierre and Marie is the fact that Marie sends Irene to the train station to meet her father. Peace and tranquility are restored as the family of four goes for a walk through the fields. Irene is chasing butterflies, and Eve is toddling through the tall grass. Marie remembers, quote, Nothing was going to trouble us. We were happy. Pierre reaches over and touches Marie's hair and says, Life has been sweet with you, Marie. Pierre stays through the weekend, which is Easter Sunday, and leaves on Monday. He takes with him a small bouquet of fresh flowers from the walk. Marie and the girls return to Paris on Wednesday. There are the usual hassles for a mother on the first day back. Marie is busy with the children, laundry, and shopping for food. Pierre is upset with the maid and says her work is sloppy. The Curies might be world-famous physicists, but they are also just a family. This scene could have been any household of working parents with young children. The Curies must stay mindful of their professional responsibility, the needs of their children, and yet both of them are in poor health. Events the next day are going to shake the world. On the side of the United States, citizens of San Francisco suffer upheaval of an earthquake which leaves behind a broken city. On the side of Europe, the world of science experiences a seismic shift, and Marie's heart is broken. Pierre asks Marie to go with him, but Marie wants to stay with the girls. When Pierre is on his way out, he calls up to Marie and asks if she will come later in the afternoon. Marie calls back that she has too much to do. Their friend, Joseph Kowalewski, and that's the Polish physicist that had introduced them, he's coming over for dinner that night. In exasperation, Marie adds to her response, "Don't torment me." After his work at the university, Pierre goes to a luncheon and discussion. Pierre, as a means of resolving his irritation with the Academy of Science, has helped form a new group, the Association of Professors of the Science Faculties. Pierre is vice president, and the group's purpose is to challenge the current system that promotes teachers based on seniority rather than ability. To annul rules that deny girls a science education, and to change the dangerous working conditions for lab assistants. These are radical ideas for 1906. The meeting on this day includes Jean Perrin, Paul Langevin, and their dinner guest for the evening, Joseph Kowalski. Pierre, so delighted with the meeting, wants to continue the conversation after the lunch is over. He invites everyone to his house for dinner that evening. When he leaves the meeting, it is raining out, and he puts up his umbrella. He needs to stop by a print shop to proof an article he has written. Is he preoccupied? Is he deep in some train of thought? No one will know. What we know is he steps into the street. He is knocked over by a horse pulling a cart. The horses don't trample him, and for a moment it seems Pierre might escape. It's the wheel of the wagon. It crushes his head. Pierre dies instantly. The wagon driver stops. He is sobbing. A crowd starts to gather at the scene. Cabs are hailed to bring the body to the police station, but they refuse because it is so bloody. Checking the wallet to know the victim's identity, the name Pierre Curie buzzes through the onlookers. Realizing this loss to their country, people start blaming the wagon driver. Someone goes to inform Paul Appel, the dean of the department at the Sorbonne. Pierre's body is finally taken to the police station. A doctor arrives. Nothing can be done for Pierre except to ease the tremendous blow about to strike his wife. The doctor wraps a bandage around the top of Pierre's crushed skull. He cleans Pierre's face. André de Buren arrives at the police station. De Buren is the one to bring Pierre's body home. Ahead of de Buren arriving, Paul Appel and Jean Perrin are on their way to the Curie's home. They are in shock with this divergence from reality. Just a few hours earlier, Perrin was talking with a happy Pierre who is inviting everyone for dinner. Dr. Curie answers the door to see these two men he has known for years. Dr. Curie realizes immediately that something is horribly wrong. Appel and Perrin ask to see Marie. Dr. Curie doesn't answer their request. Instead, he says, "My son is dead." Appel and Perrin explain what has happened. Dr. Curie is crying and saying, "What was he dreaming of this time?" Marie, out finishing errands, comes home with the girls. Paul Appel tells Marie what has happened. Marie cannot fathom Appel's words. The world becomes surreal with this sudden, devastating news. She responds, "Pierre is dead? Dead? Absolutely dead?" Marie leaves the room and goes out to sit in the garden. Thousands of raindrops are pouring down from the sky. Nature, that Pierre had loved, turns her spring rain into tears of mourning. Marie sits in the garden bench, waiting for Pierre's body to be brought home. The police inspector arrives with Pierre's belongings for Marie. Marie looks at Pierre's keys, wallet, and watch. His belongings look normal, like nothing ever happened. De Buren arrives with the ambulance, and tremors shake Marie as Pierre's body is placed in a room downstairs. Marie goes in the room and shuts the door behind her. In a quote later in Marie's book, she writes, I shall not attempt to describe the grief of the family left by Pierre Curie, end quote. Not only to describe the grief is painful, but it is private, and by now we understand the Curie's need for privacy. Marie does record, quote, in the study room to which he was never to return, the water buttercups he had brought from the country were still fresh, end quote. That is the insight, the shock of sudden grief or calamity. Your world has just shattered, and the wrenched emotions come from seeing these flowers. On one level, the flowers free of this tragedy are the sweet memory of their recent time together. On another level, considering the enormous shock that Marie has just felt, how did it not hit the flowers too? How has the vase not crashed to the floor as Pierre's body passed by? How did the flowers not wilt from the quaking grief coming from behind the door? A message is sent across the yard to the parents' house where Irene is playing. Marie, shielding her daughter from this gruesome catastrophe, asks if Irene can stay the next few days. Marie sends a telegram to Bronya. Does Marie struggle to find the words to a new reality that's so awful? The telegram says, Pierre dead. Result, accident. Jacques arrives the next morning. Marie and Jacques, too stunned for words, can only cry. Any privacy is short-lived. Over the next few days, the doorbell is a continual interruption as it announces each visitor. The President of the Republic, the President of the Council, and senior members of the Sorbonne are arriving at the Curie's house. These are condolences from the very people who had cared so little about Pierre, and now they are invading Marie's privacy. If the doorbell isn't announcing a guest, it is declaring the arrival of another telegram. Aside from the obligatory notes, many are sincere expressions of grief and sorrow from royalty, scientists, and everyday people. Pierre's laboratory assistant writes later, quote, his immense kindness extended even to his humblest servants who adored him. I've never seen sincere or more harrowing tears than those shed by his laboratory attendants at the news of his sudden decease. Lippmann writes to Marie, quote, it seems to me that I have lost a brother. I did not know by what bonds I was attached to your husband, and I know it today. I suffer also for you, madame, end quote. And Marie is suffering. She writes in her journal, Pierre, my Pierre, you are there, calm as a poor wounded man sleeping with his head wrapped up. Your lips, which I used to call greedy, are pale and colorless. Your little beard is touched with gray. Your hair is hardly visible because the wound starts there, and above your forehead to the right is the bone that has been broken. Oh, how you were hurt, how you bled. Your clothes were soaked in blood. What a terrible shock your head suffered. Your poor head that I stroked so often, taking it in my two hands. I would kiss your eyelids, which you would close so that I could touch them, bending your head down to me with a familiar gesture. Making plans for the funeral, the French government wants to suddenly honor their favorite son, not with the laboratory that it was promised for years, but with a state funeral. Marie, knowing Pierre's desire to minimize the fuss, she declines. She will not have Pierre's funeral a public event. The burial will be at the Sceaux Cemetery where Pierre's mother is buried. It will take place Saturday, 3 days after Pierre's death. There will be no grand funeral, no ceremony, and no speeches. Guests will be family and friends only. And Marie later writes, "Your coffin was closed and I couldn't see you anymore. I couldn't let them cover it with the awful black cloth. I covered it with flowers and sat down next to it." Marie also writes, "They came to get you, an unhappy group. I looked at them. I didn't talk to them. We took you back to Sco, and we watched you go down into the large, deep hole. Then there was a frightful parade of people. They wanted to take us away. We resisted, Jacques and I. We wanted to watch till the very end. They filled up the grave. They put sheaves of flowers on it. It was all over. Pierre was sleeping his last sleep under the earth. It was the end of everything, everything, everything." Paul Langevin gives a eulogy of his friend and teacher and says, "My finest memories of my school years are those of moments passed there standing before the blackboard, where he took pleasure in talking with us, in awakening in us fruitful ideas, and in discussion of research which formed our taste for the things of science." On April 22nd, the day Pierre is buried, a newspaper says this, quote, "On the arm of her father-in-law, Madame Curie followed her husband's coffin to a grave that had been dug at the base of the cemetery wall in the shadow of the chestnut trees. There she remained motionless for a moment, with a fixed and hard look on her face. But when a spray of flowers was brought up to the grave, she took it suddenly and began pulling out the flowers one by one and scattering them over the coffin. She did this slowly and deliberately, and seemed to have completely forgotten the other people gathered there, who were deeply impressed and did not make a comment. The master of ceremonies, however, felt obliged to warn Madame Curie that she would have to receive the condolences of the people present. Then, without saying a word, she let the bouquet fall to the ground and rejoined her father-in-law. At a time when Marie, grieving her husband, friend, and intimate work partner, she should be able to forget, quote, "the other people gathered," end quote. There is pressure to meet the public expectations. Previously, Pierre and Marie would withstand this pressure together. Now, Marie will face this challenge alone. Eve writes these insights. "It is commonplace to say that a sudden catastrophe may transform a human being forever. Nevertheless, the decisive influence of these minutes upon the character of my mother, upon her destiny and that of her children, cannot be passed over in silence. Marie Curie did not change from a happy young wife to an inconsolable widow. The metamorphosis was less simple and more serious. The interior tumult that lacerated Marie, the nameless horror of her wandering ideas, were too virulent to be expressed in complaints or in confidences. From the moment when these three words, 'Pierre is dead,' reached her consciousness, a cape of solitude and secrecy fell upon her shoulders forever. Madame Curie on that day in April became not only a widow, but at the same time a pitiful and incurably lonely woman. Marie is now the famous widow." Headlines from the New York Times, Blair, "Professor Curie killed in Paris street." Marie's age is 38, and the fact that Pierre is dead might be the only accuracy in the media. The torrent of misinformation due to blind spots or purposeful slant begins with quotes such as these. "Success followed early hardship. Curie was greatly aided by Madame Curie." Or, "In his researches, he was aided by Madame Marie Curie, by Marie Sklodowska, a Pole who was born at Warsaw in 1868. And the article claims Pierre leaves behind one daughter. Marie writes about the funeral day. We put you into the coffin Saturday morning, and I held your head up for this move. We kissed your cold face for the last time. Then a few periwinkles from the garden on the coffin, and the little picture of me that you called the good little student, and that you loved. It is the picture that must go with you into the grave, the picture of her who had the happiness of pleasing you enough so that you did not hesitate to offer to share your life with her, even when you had seen her only a few times. You often told me that this was the only occasion in your life when you acted without hesitation, with the absolute conviction that you were doing well. My Pierre, I think you were not wrong. We were made to live together, and our union had to be. Marie later reflects on the effect on Irene of losing Pierre. Quote, the loss of her father will weigh on her existence, and we will never know how much harm this will have done to her. Because I dreamed, my Pierre, and I often told you that this daughter who promised to resemble you in her seriousness, calm thoughtfulness, would become your workmate as soon as possible, and that she would owe the best of herself to you. Who will give her what you could have? And for Eve, too young to remember her father, Marie remembers the last night with Pierre, and she writes, Eve was ill. I made you take your shoes off to avoid noise. At night Eve woke and I had to rock her in my arms. Then I put her down between us. You kissed her several times. She went to sleep soon after. Suffering the loss of having a partner to discuss hopes and dreams for their children, Marie writes, we were talking about education, which interested us so much. It was to give children a great love of nature, of life, and the curiosity to explore them. You thought like me and felt that we shared a rare and admirable mutual understanding. Marie is not prepared for how to handle the news with Irene. The day after the funeral, Marie goes to see Irene at the parents' house. She tells Irene that her father has died. Irene, who is 8 years old, is quiet and leaves the room. Marie says to Mrs. Perrin, she's too young to understand. When Marie leaves, Irene is found crying and wants to go home. When Irene goes home, she sees her mother sobbing. A few days later, Marie writes of Irene. Now she doesn't seem to be thinking about it anymore. Marie, in a state of shock, is not able to see Marie, in a state of shock, is not able to take in any more anguish than her own and misjudges her eldest daughter. Where Marie is emotionally absent, filling in any gaps for Irene and Eve is Aunt Bronya, Grandfather Curie, Uncle Jacques, and Uncle Joseph, with a life story of support for each other. This is one more chapter. Marie remains far away in her grief, wrestling with the turmoil of loss. Her brainwaves are unable to cross the fault line that has gapped open. Mourning is difficult for a person to maneuver in private life, but worse for a public figure. And a journal entry by Marie is, everyone is talking, and all I can see is Pierre on his deathbed. And she writes in her journal, my Pierre, I can't stop thinking about you. My head is bursting and my mind is confused. I can't understand that from now on I have to live without seeing you, without smiling at my life's sweet friend. And later on she writes, my Pierre, I get up after having slept quite well, relatively calm. Hardly a quarter of an hour later, and here I am again wanting to howl like a wild animal. And what is the torment that raises her grief to a howl? Remorse. She writes, in the morning you went out in a hurry, you left, and asked me from downstairs if I was going to the laboratory. I answered that I had no idea and begged you not to torment me. And this is how you left. And the last sentence I spoke to you was not a sentence of love and tenderness. and I only saw you dead again. Marie's last words to Pierre haunts her. The Curie tombstone at the cemetery now bears his name. Marie goes to visit, and she writes, "Yesterday at the cemetery, I did not succeed in understanding the words Pierre, Curie, engraved on the stone. The beauty of the countryside hurt me. I put my veil down so as to see everything through my crape. I want to tell you, I want to tell you, I want to tell you." As the days go by, she reveals, quote, "I sometimes have the absurd idea that you are going to come back. Didn't I have it yesterday when hearing the sound of the front door closing, the absurd idea that it was you?" For the Curies, being spiritualists, her wonder is even more wishful thinking, and she writes, "I put my head against the coffin. I spoke to you. I told you that I loved you and that I had always loved you with all my heart. It seemed to me that from this cold contact of my forehead with the casket, something came to me, something like a calm and an intuition that I could yet find the courage to live. Was this an illusion, or was this an accumulation of energy coming from you and condensing in the closed casket, which came to me as an act of charity on your part?" Wavering with the will to move forward, Marie is suffering. Every aspect of her life is crushed and must be restructured. Eve writes the multiple points of connection between her parents, all the things Marie is missing. Eve writes, "Ideas, big and little, questions, remarks, and advice were thrown back and forth at every hour of the day between Pierre and Marie. Compliments, too, and friendly reproaches. Between these two equals who admired each other passionately but could never envy, there was a workers' comradeship, light and exquisite, which was perhaps the most delicate expression of their profound love." Marie can only grieve, and she writes, "I endure life, but never again will I be able to enjoy it. I will never be able to laugh genuinely until the end of my days. I no longer am able to devote any time to social life. All our friends in common will tell you that I never see them anymore except for business, for questions concerning work or education of the children. No one visits me, and I don't want to see anyone, and I haven't been able to avoid offending some people in my circle and my laboratory who don't find me sufficiently friendly. I've completely lost the habit of conversation without a set goal." But what is not lost is her North Star sense of scientific integrity. Dr. Curie and others suggest to Marie that she make the radium she has produced her personal property, worth 1,000,000 francs. They point out this would assure her daughter's financial futures. Even in this chapter of darkness and insecurity, Marie stands by her previous decision to donate the radium to the laboratory. Marie will also uphold the decision of her and Pierre's to keep public their techniques. Trying to find solace, Marie goes to the laboratory. The question of how to continue confronts her, and she writes, "I want to talk to you in the silence of this laboratory, where I did not think I could live without you. I tried to make a measurement for a graph on which each of us had made some points, but I felt the impossibility of going on. The laboratory had infinite sadness and seemed a desert. It seems at one moment that I feel nothing and that I can work, and then the anguish returns. The simple act of walking down the street," end quote. "The simple act of walking down the street is filled with torment." Quote, "In the street I walk as though hypnotized, without care about anything. I will not kill myself, but among all these carriages, isn't there one which will make me share the fate of my beloved?" End quote. Making public Marie's journal entries might appear a violation of her privacy, except there are records of Marie's request to destroy some of her writing. What has been made public has been sifted through by her daughter Eve. For the journal entries now in print, it is plausible these writings are Marie's way of saying what she wants known. Marie knows her life will be recorded with or without her input, and she is all too aware of the media warping stories about the Curies. If they start to twist the story of her and Pierre, Marie wants her words as a record. What Marie wants known is the complete devotion Pierre and Marie had for each other. The family must adjust around the new yawning gaps of having no father, husband, friend, or son. Dr. Curie asks Marie if she would rather he move in with his son Jacques. Marie replies, "If you went away, it would hurt me. But you should choose what you prefer." Dr. Curie replies, "What I prefer, Marie, is to stay with you always." And how to make your way back, the slow crawl out of the deep pit. Marie writes, "Yesterday, for the first time since the terrible day, something funny Irene said made me laugh, but I was hurting while I was laughing. Do you remember how you reproached me yourself for laughing after your mother's death? I try to start living again. I think it is an illusion. I realize, however, if I am to have the least chance of success in my work, I must not think any more of my misery by working." I'm sorry, I should reread. "I must not think any more of my misery by working. But the very idea of it revolts me. It seems to me, after having lost Pierre, I will never be able to laugh from the heart till the end of my days." A burden for the family after the death of an income earner is the question, what about finances? Pierre's friends suggest having a public collection. Marie says no. What about the Sorbonne? What will they do with the vacancy of Pierre's position? Will they allow Marie to still be chief at the school's laboratory? The obvious choice is for the Sorbonne to offer Pierre's position to Marie. Her qualifications are equal to Pierre's, except one. Marie is not a man. The Sorbonne hedges and offers Marie a pension like they allotted to Louis Pasteur's widow. If the committee is hoping Marie will accept their offer and slip quietly into the shadows, they are disappointed. Marie declines the offer and informs the Sorbonne she will work and earn her own living. The faculty knows Marie is the only person qualified to replace Pierre, yet they can't fathom a woman teaching at the Sorbonne, let alone hold the position of a chair. In this self-inflicted quandary, the Faculty of Sciences makes an offer. They suggest Marie become the director of the laboratory that's still needing to be built, and that Pierre's chair stay empty. Marie would be expected to do Pierre's job without officially having the title. Finding this loophole allows the Sorbonne to still uphold their policy that no woman on their faculty is a teaching staff. At this point, Marie's colleagues pressure the Sorbonne to offer Marie the position Pierre held. Jacques Curie and Georges Goyer tell the dean of faculty that Marie is the only French physicist able to continue her. Still in a dither, the Sorbonne makes the offer of assistant professor. Marie takes the position. Marie, teaching the only classes on radioactivity in the world, is not promoted to full professor until 1908. A newspaper headline declares, "A great victory for feminists." The article points to the obvious, quote, "For if a woman is allowed to teach upper-level courses to students of both sexes, what does that say about so-called male superiority? I tell you the time is very near when women will become human beings," end quote. Marie records no entries in her journal of rancor and bitterness. There is sadness to the circumstances, but not spite. Marie writes in her journal, "I also want to tell you that they nominated me for your chair, and some imbeciles congratulated me. I cannot conceive of anything which would give me real personal happiness except perhaps scientific work, and not even that, because if successful, I would be distressed in that you didn't know. This laboratory gives me an illusion of keeping the remains of your life. I found a little picture of you near the scales with such a lovely smiling expression that I cannot look at it without sobbing, since I will never again see that sweet smile. Pierre has already given Marie the encouragement to go on when he told her earlier, "Whatever happens, even if one has to go on like a body without a soul, one must work just the same." Marie follows Pierre's direction and becomes the first woman to teach at the Sorbonne. She's the first woman to hold a full science professorship at the university that has been having a glass ceiling in place for 750 years. Her first lecture will be in November 1906. And that ends part 2 of the book. Next will be part 3 with a context and commentary. Thank you.